I am Ray, and you'll see this when you're ready to stop struggling. Tell me, are you ready? I don't know if I believe you just yet. You see, the thing about struggle is that the problem is very clear, very obvious to understand. You see, you can get results by struggling. But if that is your primary method to get what you want out of this life, well, then you'll always be struggling. And the same thing goes if you're struggling with your mind, with your thoughts, with the fear and the worry and the shame and the guilt, struggling with any of these things, struggling in life, it's always going to keep you tethered to suffering. Because life, its very nature is harmony. It's balance. And when you're separated from life, what is the opposite of balance and the opposite of harmony? Imbalance, problems, struggle. Life is a river, and you are either going with the flow or swimming upstream. And so long as you swim upstream, you're always going to be struggling. Until eventually life just beats you down until you're so exhausted you can't do it anymore. Finally surrender. The moment that you begin to surrender to life, the struggle goes away, the problems begin going away, and you return to balance, harmony. And we are just silly because the only reason that we struggle is because we want a sense of control over our life. That we feel if we don't do something about this problem or whatever it is, more bad stuff is going to happen. But it is in fact the struggle that makes the bad stuff happen. Because you cannot have health in a toxic environment, and you cannot have toxicity in a healthy environment. So when inwardly you are struggling, you're in resistance, you're not at ease, problems begin, like germs, just proliferating all over the place. And yet when you are in inner harmony and inner balance, so too it's much more difficult for the toxicity to thrive. No more germs. And so what we find is that the problems we experience in our life are direct reflections of our inner state of being. The reason that people stay stuck in life and they never escape is because they never get out of this struggle. They never stop resisting life. They always keep judging it. They always keep judging themselves, judging life, judging their circumstances, judging the past, judging the future, judging other people. Only the mind resists. And every time the mind resists, it creates tension and disturbs the waters of our mind. And the more our mind is disturbed, the more we suffer struggle. No peace, no love, no joy. Maybe temporary fleeting glimpses whenever our mind has temporarily subsided in its nonsense. Think about it this way. In the present moment, it's a flow state. And the reason it's a flow state is because the mind is a portal from the inner world toward the outer world. And within, at the very source of it all, is God, is life, the source of creation. And so that God power, that life, is being filtered through us, being channeled through us, and being projected out onto the world. And that is how we create our reality. The flow state is when the mind is directed into the present moment. It becomes one with itself. And because when there is one, there is no other, there is no two, the mind disappears. One way I like to think about it is imagine frequencies. If you've ever played the piano, you got an octave, which are two notes that are the same, but just one note is higher, one note is lower, but it's the same note. So you take two notes and you start descending on the piano, each step at a time. And eventually, the note closest to this one is dissonant. It sounds bad. It's not harmonious. But then you just shift one more, and the second note disappears. Because, well, there's only one note. So you go from two-ness to oneness. But what happens is that if your mind is perpetually disturbed, instead of being in harmony, you become in dissonance. And dissonance creates tension, even in music. You want a serial killer soundtrack? These are the notes you play. Dun, 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 dun. And so what the mind does, it oscillates all the time out of the present moment. And the more you have been traumatized and conditioned and are attached to your mind stuff, the more perpetually you will be separated from the present moment, oscillating all the time. And this oscillation creates disturbances in the mind. It creates tension in your system. You fall out of harmony. As I like to say, we are all instruments of God, and our life is the song. And whether or not your life, your song is in harmony is determined by whether or not you are in tune. Your mind is an instrument that has to be tuned. Haven't you ever heard of chakras? You like chakras? I like chakras. When one energy system is out of balance, it sends our whole thing out of whack. We are not fully congruent, fully in harmony. And that lack of harmony, that disturbance in our auric field, let's say, will project problems out into reality, that of which we will face and have to deal with. And where we go wrong is that we struggle with these problems, not realizing that the source of the problem is the inner imbalance within us. And that you don't have to struggle. All you got to do is return to inner harmony. Because the problem is you can go on and struggle with things forever. It never ends. So at some point you have to realize, oh wait a minute. Struggling does not actually work. Even if you have had some success grinding, struggling really hard, that's just, par for the course, whatever that means. All humans struggle. But at some point, you got to get sick of it. Because there's a much easier way to achieve everything with way less time, way less suffering. And the good news is, it's only just a habit. What has happened is that we have been conditioned over a lifetime to always be paying attention to our mind noise. So we're always giving it our attention, our energy. So we're always fueling thoughts. We're making more thoughts all the time by choosing to entertain the mind stuff. A little bit more explanation. The mind and identity are one. So we all have, a lot of identities, many personality traits. And so this identity fuels thoughts related to itself. Now, based on your unique identity, you will have an infinite array of different desires and different things you want to avoid. You'll also have all of the animalistic instincts that we all have, which will drive us towards some things and away from others. But so long as you are attached to this identity, there will always be fear, because bad things can happen to the identity. If you believe yourself to be, let's say, a college student, this is a temporary identity you've taken on. You've been going to college, and then you fail your final exams. Well, now that identity is threatened. You wanted one thing, reality is not matching up to your expectations. If you identify as a good person and you start having negative thoughts, it's going to create resistance in your mind because this identity is being threatened. Oh, I thought it was a good person. What is going on? A good person can't have these kind of thoughts. If you identify as a victim, consciously or unconsciously, every situation that you go in, you'll always find things, evidence to victimize yourself. Life will conform to this identity because your mind hyper-focuses on all the things that are relevant to whatever identity that you have. The point is, the identity is what gives juice to the thoughts and causes us to hyper-focus on certain things. And the more we are attached to our identity, the more often we will be separated from the present moment, oscillating all the time, creating tension, creating resistance. And it takes us out of a flow state because as life flows through you, the waters of your mind, they get disturbed, and so therefore the flow has a harder time flowing. If you've ever watched Avatar, The Last Airbender, when the guru was teaching Aang about the chakras, he used the example of a stream. And sometimes debris and sticks and leaves and stuff like that get stuck in the stream, creating stagnant water. And when the water is stagnant and it can't flow, it becomes dirty and poisonous and not good because it falls out of balance. It falls out of the flow of life, and where life is not, death is. And the secret to inner harmony is simply by allowing the flow of life, by surrendering the mind to the present moment. And this is what all the religions will teach you, even though they won't directly say it like this. For instance, take the teachings of Jesus. It fundamentally comes down to the same thing. When you love unconditionally, you are not focused on your own selfish desires as the mind, as the identity, but you are focused on others. You are selfless, without self, no mind. And this brings you perpetually into the present moment, because there is no source of resistance or identity. Because you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about others. Take the yogas. You have Jnana Yoga, which is knowledge of self-realization, realizing your true nature. You discover that you're not the mind, that you're not the ego, that you're not your thoughts, and you realize that you are life itself. This cuts off the identity at the root. You stop feeding the thoughts. You naturally relax into the present moment more and more and more for all eternity. Freedom, salvation, liberation. Take the path of devotion, devoting yourself to a guru like Jesus, or an entity, or a deity. You're focused on God, not yourself. Thy will, not my will. That's what it's called. Same thing with selfless service, which is the Christ path. You serve the world out of unconditional love. No self. It's all about surrendering the mind, surrendering the self. Think about the path of discipline. You train your mind to focus and not get pulled all over the place. You master your reality by mastering your mind. Think about exercise. Why does exercise feel so good? It's because you're exhausting the body. You're getting the blood flow and the oxygen moving, which is the life within you. And as you start flowing, you become more and more grounded in your body in the present moment and stop getting pulled out into your mind space. The mind cannot think when the body is overwhelmed. So you lose your sense of self through intense physical exercise. And there are millions and millions of things that pull us into the present moment all the time, into a flow state. And they have to be things that grasp your attention, that are really meaningful to you. Like, say you're reading a book. When you get pulled into the book, you lose track of time. You're deeply rooted in the present moment. If the book sucks, you'll get pulled back into your mind space and say, oh, this sucks. I don't want to read this. If you're talking to somebody and you're really engaged, you lose your sense of self. You enter into a flow state. It's not even you speaking. It's just speaking is happening. Because life is flowing through you, expressing itself through you. Life is what is doing all the work. But when life can't do its job because you're so attached to your mind stuff, you castrate your power. You lose your ability to actually effectively live, literally, because you have less life stuff, life energy. What do you think depression is? Having no desire, having no motivation, lethargy, being tired all the time. You are separated from life. You're disconnected. You cannot live and feel alive when you are separated from life stuff. And struggle is the quickest way to exhaust yourself. Now, on the spiritual journey, a lot of our goal is, well, to remain permanently in the present moment. Because the more one can deeply connect to life, well, it's also union with God. And the nature of life of God is joy, love, peace. And it's the source of all abundance. This is why, for instance, taking psychedelics is such a powerful experience. If you didn't know how psychedelics work, let me fill you in. Psychedelics, in a way, trick your body into believing that you are dead. You know how like some mushrooms, they actually kill you if you eat them? Well, magic mushrooms do the same thing, but instead of killing you on the body level, they kill you on the mind level, higher frequency. And so what happens? The body triggers the mind into dissolving. Or should I say, the body triggers the system into releasing the death chemicals. And it essentially opens up the floodgates from source through you. And the mind dissolves in the process. We have the self right here, which is not the same kind of selfishness that we were talking about earlier. There's the higher self and there's the mind self. There's two distinctions. In our normal daily state, we live in separation from our higher self, from our true self, and we identify with this identity. But because we open up the floodgates, the self grows and expands. It's like how in 1 billion years, the sun will turn into a red giant. It will blow up and expand and consume Mercury, Venus, the Earth. Same thing happens here. The self gets so big, it consumes the ego, and the ego dissolves. And often for the first time, you experience reality without the sense of separation, without the ego mind. And this connects you directly to God. You'll experience God for the first time. And that's why it's so impactful. And what often happens is that you get this overwhelming sense of bliss. At least every time I've taken psychedelics, there is always the serotonin bliss that is like the best feeling. Because that is the feeling of life itself. That is the feeling of being connected. And you'll often get this sense of, oh, everybody is connected. Everybody, we're all one. I love everybody. You'll get overwhelming feelings of love toward everything. You want to call up your parents and tell them how sorry you were. And in that state, you're going to change your life and everything's going to be okay. And everything's wonderful and everything is perfect. And you got to worry about nothing. Everything is wonderful. And then you come back down. The experience becomes like a dream, and you return to separation, only with the memory of being connected with this. The mind kind of shakes itself off and begins to fueling itself once again with thoughts. So you'll have this afterglow effect that's like, just this nice, quiet, radiant joy. And then as you begin having experiences, you start judging things again. You start thinking and ruminating about things. Then the mind rebuilds itself. It becomes stronger and stronger and stronger until there's no more radiant joy left. And you're disconnected from life once again. You'll see this happen every morning as well. Every night, when we go to sleep, the mind dissolves back into the self. And when there is no separation, there is a void. And that void is the void of deep sleep. Deep sleep is merging back to oneness with your true nature as the self, the higher self, or the divine essence of God. So every night you're returning to heaven and dipping your toes in the infinite ocean of bliss that is within you. Why do we do this? It's because the way that our existence is set up is that we only can store so much energy in our body for the day. So much life. So that's the whole point of sleep. You go throughout your day, use up your life force, use up your energy. And when that life is gone, can you guess? Death. But it's a mini death called sleep. So we can't live without the life. We go to sleep, go tap into the source of life itself, restore our juices. Then ideally we wake up the next day ready to go. And we just do that all the time, every day. This is also why saints and gurus and mystics, they don't have to sleep very long. Because once you're always connected to life, there's no need for it. You're always being rejuvenated. But the more attached you are to your mind stuff, the more rest you're going to need. Because you're going to perpetually be exhausted by feeding all of this mind stuff. You're going to be in more constricted energy, in resistance, struggling, problems, negativity, and suffering. And so what happens on the spiritual path is that once you cut off the root, the identity, the mind stuff no longer has anything to feed on because it was only feeding on your energy. So slowly but surely over time, the mind gets softer and softer and softer. And as it gets softer, the light of the true self begins shining through. For most people, the ego, the mind, is like a big dark cloud that blocks out the light and the warmth of the sun because everybody's so attached to their mind stuff. But as it softens up, as you stop reinforcing it, because you don't believe it anymore, the light of the self becomes manifest, and you experience an increase in peace, love, joy, abundance naturally. And if you go all the way with this, you find someone like Jesus. Now every so often, a special human being comes into this existence to remind us of what we have forgotten. When one returns to their true nature without the mind's resistance at all, they become a Christ. And that is why Jesus was God in form as a man, because he was in a human body, but he was purely the self, the Christ. And if you haven't thought about this before, you say God the Father, you have the Son. That is why Christ said, no one will enter into the Father's kingdom but through me. Now he wasn't talking about me, Jesus, me, Christ. And here most people are lost in life, lost in the world, separated from God. So the message is, come to me, and I will give you rest. Deny thyself. Surrender. This is why humility is the primary virtue, because through pride, you reinforce this identity and you reinforce separation. Haven't you heard of Satan? That's the whole deal. So prideful, the strongest sense of separation from God, from life. This is why he's the king of the underworld, death. But through humility, you open yourself up to surrender, and you begin letting go so strongly of this attachment. But no matter what way you make this sandwich, it's all the same one thing. Dissolving the mind, returning to your true self, returning to unity with God. And when you're in this state, life is effortless. Because God, life, begins effortlessly flowing through you. And well, God has no limitations. This life is eternal. Which is again why, Jesus could raise the dead and raise himself after he died. Because nothing has any power over the life. So you too, when you listen to these words, you shall also be beyond death. And no laws will enslave you, but you will have mastery over the nature of reality itself, if you are devoted. And oftentimes we only get serious after life presents to us enough suffering in which we give up, finally, humility. Surrender, and you return back to oneness with all things. And every spiritual teacher will tell you that this is perhaps the most important thing that any human being could ever do. That this is actually the point of our human existence, is to remember what we have forgotten. That is our true nature. Not the mind, not the identity, but our true nature united with all things. So the mind takes the journey back into the self, the true self, and dissolves into nothingness. So the question is, how much longer will you continue to hold on to this battle, to this fight? And the mind will continue trying its best to take control over your system, to keep it. Because the mind too wants to stay alive. It doesn't want to die and dissolve into nothingness. So it will hijack your attention and continuously prevent you from finding freedom, which is why one must have perseverance and a strong desire for freedom, because without it, the mind is just going to pull you back into the gravity of the world and distract you with your senses. And what we can do is because, well, most of us aren't going to believe that our true nature is Christ, is God, because we're so heavily identified with this mind, it doesn't seem like it's plausible. So what you do, in the form of separation, you call out to God. And the more you call out to God through prayer, focusing your attention on God, the gravity of God will begin pulling you in. Because really, you got two options. You're either going to get pulled around by the gravity of the world, or pulled around by the gravity of God. If you make the world your master, you're going to be a slave to a bad thing. Because what's a better master? That which is temporary and changing, or that which is eternal and unchanging? You will never find lasting satisfaction in a temporary world, so once the world is your master, you are on a never-ending wheel of suffering for all eternity. And the only way to escape it is to realize that the world is beautiful, it's wonderful. Go do your thing. But don't be under the illusion that your happiness can be found in the world, but only that your happiness is found within you. Because you can find lasting satisfaction in the eternal. And this is what you will discover. Once you recognize your true nature, is that you are satisfied with the present moment. And sometimes the mind comes along and tries to get at you. Remember all of these cool things. But more and more you just relax into yourself, and the inner contentment arises, inner satisfaction, everlasting peace. And from this state you live your life, and everything unfolds naturally, without any struggle on your part. No resistance anymore, which means no suffering. And this is what Krishna said to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. People suffer because they believe themselves to be a body or a mind. The body suffers, the mind suffers. They do not realize that they are an eternal soul, free from the suffering of all things. And this is the proof. Once you truly recognize the self, the true self, and not through the means of psychedelics, it's the moment that you become free from suffering. It's the moment you experience peace all the time, because you are the source of freedom, of peace, love, joy, and abundance. So all you got to do is reconnect to your true self by not entertaining the idea of separation, through surrender and acceptance of life, of the present moment, by focusing on God, by focusing on being free. And you'll naturally stop worrying about everything. You'll no longer see the problems. You'll see the perfection. And there may still be roadblocks and difficulties on your journey, but you will never really struggle again. Life will feel effortless to you, because you will have dissolved the source of resistance that is keeping you from everything you've ever desired. I am Ray, and if you're tired of suffering with your negative thoughts, judging life, worrying about the future, regretting the past, if you want to finally be free from your mind prison, click the link below, launch your mind mastery. Much peace and many blessings, and remember, just be